I consider establishing shots an abdication of style. I want every shot to do at least two things. This family, this kind of like white trash, lovely gang of thugs in Woodside, they would be a great prism through which to witness our American experience.
Thank you, Hal, for coming out. Thanks for screening this with us. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
So you and I will talk for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to you guys to guide the conversation. So the universe of Henry and Faye and Simon and now Ned, is this something that has just been existing for you for 18 years? You just sort of check in every now and then and think about what might be going on with them?
It kind of grew. I didn't write Henry Fool with the intention of making a trilogy or series or anything. I worked really hard on the script, and I knew it was a script that was different than what I had written previously and what I had made previously. Most of my stories had, Trust, The Unbelievable Truth, Simple Man. Yeah, there were stories that took place over a couple of weeks, maybe. Most of them like in a week or days. Simple Man takes place over 3 days. And I knew that I wanted to write something that was kind of epic in that sense. It was going to be a whole generational thing. And that was it, but I knew it was going to be big. It would be longer. It was 130 minutes, is longer than most of my films. But when we were making it, after I had cast it, and while we were shooting it, I fell in love with these characters, like Faye, for instance, what I thought was a really good character, supporting character in the script. But once Parker and I were working on it, day by day on set, I was like, I love this girl. She's like fascinating. And
that was just seeing Parker bring it to life?
Yeah, she did something that Aubrey did with this character too, brought color and dimension to the character that I hadn't necessarily written. Things that, it's just a woman would probably bring, more insight, a particular insight into these characters. I try hard to imagine my way into a woman's psyche, but I can't go.
Is there something, do you put on a dress, or what do you do to get there?
I just try to imagine what I like about girls. I mean, it's just, I very rarely write a girl that I don't like.
Yeah, right.
There's that about making stories too. It's a lot about wish fulfillment and stuff. But anyway, by the time James Urbaniak pointed it out, in the year after making Henry Fool, and we had a lot of success with this film, Henry Fool. So we were all traveling around doing interviews and stuff. And at one point, James said, "You've made this joke just once too many. You've said oh, this is like my Star Wars. The Grimm family is my Luke Skywalker thing." And it's true. I said it so many times that he said, "I think there's more going on."
Is that how we're
Henry's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And so we all used to hang around together, and everybody would come over my house, Miho, when we were married, and have supper and stuff like that. And I began talking out loud about it. I said, "Yeah, if we did a number 2, Faye would go out into the world looking for Henry."
Right.
And that's as far as I took it. And I didn't really think about part 3 until I had finished writing part 2. So, and that was something I was committed to, is making 3 separate movies that could stand alone. You didn't have to see the earlier one.
Was that just an interesting creative challenge for yourself, or what? Why was that? Why was that an idea?
It was interesting creative challenge because I said, this family, this kind of white trash, lovely gang of thugs, in Woodside. They would be a great prism through which to witness our American experience. So 10 years after making Henry Fool, I said, yeah, I mean, we were living kind of in a different world between 1996 and 2005 when we shot it. Things were really different. And I said, well, international terrorism, espionage, like I couldn't believe reading the New York Post. It was like reading a spy novel every day. So I said, all right, so we'll take Faye. She's going to go out and look for Henry, ostensibly. But what this is really going to be about is like Henry Fool. What's the nation like? What are we like? And we're going to use this family as the prism through which we see this. And then by the time I got to this, it was a little less overt, but still, there's this reawakened interest in particularly the younger generation in Christian spirituality across the country that I find kind of interesting. I've taught in the intervening years sometimes, short stays at colleges and stuff, and interesting, young people going through things that I thought were kind of a little like past, like in the 70s. By the 70s, I thought, well, that's over.
We've outgrown this.
Yeah. But it comes back, and I wanted to deal with it respectfully, but critically. And I hope that's what I did with representing Ned. Yeah. I loved writing the family, Martin playing the minister, and that whole kind of home life.
Well, there's a line of dialogue in Trust that seems extremely applicable to Ned Rifle, where something effective, family is a loaded gun, you point it in the wrong way and someone gets killed, or that's...
family's like a loaded gun, you point it in the wrong direction, someone's going to kill themselves or kill somebody.
Yeah.
Which I just reread Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, the paperback that I read in the early 80s, the same one. It's all my marginalia. Just a total ripoff from Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
Victor Hugo's line is about female beauty. He said, a girl's beauty is a double-edged sword. If she doesn't know what she's doing with it, she might hurt herself or others.
Right.
I totally, the note's right there. It's highlighted, and in my, it's just like, and I invert it for my own purposes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I like, you look at Faye Grimm as a part of this trilogy, and it's like, okay, everything is counterterrorism. It is that moment. There's a lot packed into Henry Fool, but just the idea that a poet laureate might be a garbage man. I don't know what you were thinking about the state of culture in the 90s, or what was making you think about that as a plot point.
I think it was the improbability of it.
Yeah.
I was also interested in the internet, which was not there yet. People were talking about it a lot, and yeah. And so I immediately thought, wow, somebody could become famous by blogging. We didn't even use those words, but Faye puts Simon's poem on the internet.
Right. Well, the ones that jump out to me as maybe you commenting on culture from this movie. Certainly Simon wanting to give up being a poet laureate to become a YouTube comedian.
Yes.
Another that someone's stalker would write their bio or their relative's bio. It seems like a pretty scathing view of the publishing industry, the scenes with the publisher. Were those just sort of, bones you felt like picking or things you felt like getting out there?
Nothing I feel particularly angry about or resentful of, but yeah, I see that. I mean, I try not to reach too far for subject matter. I just try to, what's there? I'll do things with it stylistically once it's in the universe of my story, but the subject matter I try to take from what's there within arm's reach. And yeah, it's like everybody I meet wants to be a stand-up comic now. That seems to be the height of cultural achievement or something.
How's your routine? Is it
pretty bad,
along?
pretty bad. This is about as good as it gets, answering questions. And of course, that's fascinating too, in a way. I've seen great stand-up comics and stuff. But I also, given that really grew out of what I knew about these characters too. I asked myself in regards to Simon, after all this heartbreaking controversy, what he says. I mean, he's having a nervous breakdown, basically. You know, this stand-up comic ambition of his is not going to last long. I think he's over it by the end. He bought himself a new notebook, and it's going to be a big poem about Susan.
Right. Which
I think, to me, he's about to write this story that you just saw. Yeah, so Susan is really she's a force.
She is.
She's a stalker or whatever, maybe, that's what the concierge thinks, but you know, even Simon says this is a provocative and interesting reading of these poems. I mean, she's smart. She penetrated these poems.
You know, before, when you introduced the film, you said this is the final piece of this trilogy. Yeah. Obviously, a fourth would no longer make it a trilogy. Yeah. But, you know, and also, yeah, the four-part trilogy, make it happen. But it seems like if there were to be one, and if she hadn't died in the end, that Susan would be a great character through which to carry on this story.
Yeah, I have every intention in the world working with Aubrey again, one way or the other. I think she feels the same way. It would be good. She has something that I think I know what to do with it, and she responds to my writing pretty well.
Did you anticipate that before working with her, or is it just...
No, yeah, when I did the Kickstarter campaign, and I wrote the screenplay before that, during the Kickstarter campaign, I was basically telling people, like, I'm searching the world for the girl who's going to play Susan. It didn't, and I did. I mean, I saw hundreds of actresses, and I put at least 70 on tape, either in New York or people YouTubing the auditions and stuff. And I saw a lot of really great people, but not the kind of person I needed. And one thing led to the other. And about this time, the end of January last year, I was in communication with her agents, who are also Parker's agents. Mm-hmm. And they said, by the way, have you checked out this name? Because they had given me a whole long list of people who I was never going to get. Nobody was going to work on the $300,000 movie, right. You know. And they said, but that girl Aubrey down here, and I didn't know who she was. And I just stayed up late watching things on Netflix. And I saw Safety Not Guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And before it was over, I emailed her agent. And I said, well, this girl wants to do the role. You know, I'm making it for $300,000. I mean, and he said, oh, I think she'll do it. Well, 72 hours later, I was on the phone with Aubrey. And, she was like, yeah, I loved it. And I, spent the past 2 days watching your films. And, she did her work. She did her homework.
So now she exists in the Hal Hartley universe. It seems like you work with people repeatedly quite a bit.
Yeah, when I find there's some kind of, we communicate well without having to talk too much. It has to do about movement and a facility with the kind of dialogue I write, the rhythm and the melody that's inherent in it. That said, most of the time I know people better. I don't really know Aubrey that well, but we met a week or two, I think, before we started shooting. And then she was gone after that. But, we've been in touch back and forth. I mean, she's happy with the film. She's happy with her performance in it. So, but like with Martin Donovan or James Urbaniak or Thomas Ryan or Parker Posey, I mean, I spent a lot more time with them before we worked a lot. Aubrey reminds me a lot of Adrian Shelley. I had the same type of experience where, the nerves, they were both nervous people about, like, you want me to what? Like, I have to move around like that and say lines? And they were like, ooh, I'm going to look like a freak or something like that. I'm like, trust me, just trust me. And then they get into it, you know. And then the next scene or the next film, they're much more confident.
So a lot of the movies in the Lower East Side, I'm curious if the Lower East Side has any significance for you, or that was, I live like a block from where
From
the Blue
Broome.
Moon,
Yeah,
Orchard and Broome.
Yeah. I don't know what to think. I think what I wrote in the script, you know, you write a lot of things in the script that just become impossible. I was thinking of, like, he was living in the Chelsea. That's what I wrote. He was in the Chelsea Hotel.
Those are condos, right?
Yeah, it was impossible. I couldn't get that. And then, you know, we have a budget. You know, we had to find anyone who would work with us. We had to be there for 2 full days. And then we found the Blue Moon. And, you know, that worked out well. There was a lot of drama. But we got in. We didn't break anything, at least not much.
So going back to the beginning for you, when did you first want to be a filmmaker, and when did you start to feel like you actually were one?
I went to art school for 1 year in 1977 or 78. I think so. In Boston at the Massachusetts College of Art, and it was a great experience. You know, I thought I knew something about art in high school, but I didn't know anything. So I got turned on to everything, including film, a Super 8 filmmaking course, which was real art film. You know, nobody was like thinking about stories or anything. It was just, you know, it was visual art that moved, you know. And I got really excited about that and discovered that I did, in fact, have a narrative inclination. In fact, I had to stop going to art school after a year because we ran out of money, so I had to go back home, and I worked in a department store for a year and in my hometown, and got a job in the camera department. So I got a Super 8 projector and a camera, and I started making films. But when I applied to the State University of New York at Purchase Film School for the year of 1980, I brought the films I had made, 5 or 6 short films, and a lot of my drawings and my music, you know, for the interview, and wrote all. You know, they were very thorough. They spent the whole afternoon with me. You know, 3 of the faculty and 3 students. And that's one thing that the teachers said. They said, your drawings are really narrative. You know, these are not comics, they're drawings, but there's things happening in there. And I was like, is that all right? Okay, is it? And then, so from 1980 to 1984 at the State University of New York at Purchase, that's where I really, I developed and discovered things about my storytelling, and probably really found out all the attitudes and interests that I wanted to pursue. And then after that, the 4 years after that too, I think I really started reading aggressively after that. I remember the last thing they said when I got my diploma, when I had my review at the end of my senior year, a woman who's a good friend of mine now, Mimi Arsham, is 95, and she said, congratulations for giving yourself a very good education. Because they were like, where did he learn all this? We couldn't have. And I didn't learn that much. I still hadn't read that much, and I hadn't seen that much, but I guess I had a lot of energy. And I really discovered something that I loved, and I guess that changes a person's whole.
Meaning filmmaking in general, or a specific thing that you
Filmmaking in general, I guess, is the best way to say it. Every single part of it. From loading cameras to, taking cameras apart, putting them back together, to costume design, to set design, to directing, to writing, and that was a school that didn't insist that you specialize. In fact, they didn't want you to specialize. They wanted you to know everything. You'll figure out the particulars later. You'll become a professional in like a week if you get a job out there somewhere. But right now, we want you to know everything. at least 20% of everything. And that served me well as the years went on, because I think a lot of my crew and the actors, you know, they'll tell me, it's nice to talk to somebody who knows something about my job. Like, you're not just some idiot.
So are you a very empathic director in that sort of way? Like, you kind of get what everyone is going through on a set, and you try to...
Yeah, you have to know. I get angry, but I'm not going to yell at this electrician right now, because I know he's up. It's raining. We don't have that many lights. Someone's going to get electrocuted any minute now. So, you know, I'm not... You know, you have to know something about what they're going through, so you can be diplomatic, or just not make a crazy decision.
Right.
Like, I insist on this, you know, make it happen.
So when you say you got serious about reading in those 5 years, what do you mean? Like, you're reading all the classics,
I read
or you're
deeply,
reading about...
yeah, classics for the most part, and history. And as a result, history of religion, which is I have a whole history of religion library, and part of my library. And that shows up in this. It shows up in a lot of these stories. I just didn't know how to understand history. Like, how do you understand these Europeans if you don't understand what they were willing to go to war for? You know? So what is this thing? What the hell is Protestantism anyway? I grew up Catholic, so I barely knew anything about Catholicism, but I was like, so what's a Protestant? You know?
Right.
When I was in 7th grade, I asked a girl out, Linda DeSantis. And she said, I'm not allowed to go out with Catholics. And I was just like, what the fuck is that? So, but it took me like another 15 years to start reading about these Protestant people and what they, and why the girls can't go out with Catholics. Yeah.
No, that's where it starts. That's where.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. For someone who is, you know, starting out in filmmaking, or either working on their first short or working on their first feature, what wise words do you have to impart?
Wow. Well, love what you do. Don't do it just to get rich or famous or anything like that, because everything changes. I mean, even, you know, I thought it was really hard, and no one had any, like in my family or anything, no one had any expectation that I would become successful. You know?
Were they supportive of it?
Yeah, but they didn't know what it was all about. They just thought I was a weird kid, a weird young man, actually, because I wasn't a kid anymore. I thought it was really hard then, but you know, that was one kind of universe, and now the business of making films and getting films shown is an entirely different business. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s now, and I have to relearn an entire business.
Is being a filmmaker more about business now than it was before?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
How did you find Henry Fool or you know, Trust, or your first film? Who were you going to at that point to get those movies made?
Trust was, I had already made my first film, The Unbelievable Truth, and that was with a single investor, Jerry Brownstein, who was the man who owned the company and ran the business that I worked for. It was just him and me. I did everything. But he saw me making these smaller films, and he was curious, and he was about the age I am now, and he was doing pretty well for himself. His company, Action Productions, produced informational videotapes. That was a big thing back then. Like videotapes for Spanish and Chinese Americans to fill out their tax documents. There's a law, like the government has to do that. Right. So he got like the contract, and it was pretty lucrative, but it was boring. And he saw me and my friends making all these, you know, films, and I think he was just excited by the fun we seemed to be having. And so he put up a little bit of money, and we made The Unbelievable Truth, and that was a successful business thing. And then Trust, and like for 3 or 4 films after that, we worked with a company in London called Zenith, who no longer exists. But they had made a lot of British television produced. And there was a guy there, Scott Meek, who was a little bit ahead of the curve, and he saw something happening in the United States, low budget, more idiosyncratic, author-driven films. And he was right. And so they didn't give me a lot of money, but Trust was, like 5 times more than what The Unbelievable Truth was. And so, we got paid. I think that's the first time I ever got paid. Yeah, that's how it was done back then. It's really different now. Back then they used to go to distributors in each country and say, like, well, here's the script, here's this kid's previous film. The girl from the film is also going to be in this film. And a French distributor would say, okay, we'll pony up a certain amount, and we'll give you 10% of that now. And when the film is done and you deliver it to us, we'll give you the other 90%. And then you'd go to the bank and you'd get a loan, based on all these letters of commitment and these 10% deposits, really. That's how it was done then. But it's not done that way anymore.
Yeah, I remember when we were starting Kickstarter, reading about some book about indie film in the 80s and 90s. And it painted this picture. I specifically imagined you or Jim Jarmusch or Lynch, like, going to dinner with weird Bulgarian oligarchs to get a check for like 15 grand. And and that's probably what more filmmaking was than I realized.
I never had to do that. I've had a couple of conversations in my life with David Lynch, and he has spent some time, but I think he kind of invites that. He likes the crazy oligarchs. I was always pretty mercantile kind of. That's why I like doing the Kickstarter way. There's real clarity about it. I'm saying, like, I have this. It's like, you're a baker. I'm a farmer. I've got wheat. You can use it to do your thing. Right. So we'll just so that's how I feel like with the people. Say, look, you know me. I can make a film. I'll show you the script if you want. This is it. She's in it. He's in it. If you want a DVD, do it now. And a year from now, you'll get your DVD. Yeah. And I like the clarity of that. It's not as speculative.
Yeah, absolutely. Questions from the audience? Owen here has a microphone, if you'd like to ask. This gentleman over here.
Hi. I just have a question, the way you shot the movie. It seems like there was a lot of close-ups, medium close-ups, like you were in Spokane, Washington, although at the end of the movie you said you shot it in New York.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious as to why you didn't have any like larger establishing shots, even if it was just like, some B-roll shot somewhere from outside Washington or outside Seattle, or even just a skyline or something to give a sense of where you are in the movie. Was that a choice, or is that just...
Yeah, that's been a choice in my career. I consider establishing shots an abdication of style, an abdication of responsibility, stylistic responsibility. I want every shot to do at least 2 things, not just one. And establishing shots, by their very nature, do one thing. So that goes all the way back to my first films. However, staying really close to people, that's also a budgetary concern. This is a very small budget film and a big story. And we have to pretend we're in Spokane and Oregon, and we're just in Westchester County. These days it's a little bit easier. I spent a lot of time on like Google, just like saying, what the hell does Spokane look like? Outside Spokane, to get all these pictures of the highways, and like, that looks like Queens. That looks like Westchester County. And then we start to build our pictures around that. But yeah, we had to, you have just do what you can do 200% well, rather than a number of things that you can only do 70% well.
There are a couple of really nice moments of super quick cuts. The very beginning, just sort of giving a sense of the scene of the cuts from the Reverend to the cross. All that was very nice, and even the hotel scene with the hotel light going out and the cop's car, the lights
Yeah.
flipping on. There's a nice way to establish those things very creatively.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's about what you don't show. A lot of the times, you just, and also a movie like this, you know, it's dialogue driven. The dialogue says a lot, and like you say, that's something we could do 200% well. So focus on that.
Anyone else? In the back? And over here.
The scenes with Parker Posey in the prison, was that a real prison? And if so, how challenging was it to get that location on a tight budget?
Yeah, that was challenging. It was a real prison. It's in Queens somewhere. Like only the first floor of the prison, it's like an 8-story tall building, and the first floor is still active, like it's a holding place. Prisoners will be there only for a day when they're in transit. It's right next to a big court building. And the many floors that they use for shooting. I mean, the city makes a lot of money. Orange is the new black, shoots there a lot. We could afford one day, 14 hours. Parker she did all that in 14 hours. Yeah, it was just built, and there was terrible ventilation. You know, we were dying in there. It was really hard, but she's really good. So I wouldn't have tried that without someone who's tried and tested like that. I mean, she knows, she gets her dialogue down, and she also knows how. I hardly have to direct her anymore. I'll tell her where to go, but she understands probably her and DJ Mendel, who's been in a number of my films too. They are the actors who understand how the rhythm and melody of my dialogue needs to fit with the rhythm and melody of physical activity. And yeah, so we did that, 14 pages of text in one day.
So I have a small question about your takedown of Protestant spirituality. And it's niggling. Can you explain the photo in the Bible? Because his flaw, I mean, I see his flaw as being the moment where he says, and I'm going to kill him.
Right.
But we've already had this other, he kept the photo.
I don't think,
What's that
I
about?
think of that as first of all, I hope this isn't considered a takedown of anybody's religion. I have a real affection for these characters who make up that family, the Gardner family, and Gardner himself, who's
They
got
are delightfully
flaws.
flawed, but the
Yeah.
Catholics got away quite well with just a rosary, right?
Yeah, it's a piece. He has to like learn how to do that. No, I liked that about Ned and Claire and all that. That they have a sexuality. They're not denying it. They just put it off. But I feel quite close to Ned there. Wow, Claire. Look at this later. And I like Claire a lot at that moment too. Should we do that? I don't know if that answers your question, but like I said, it has something. I wanted to treat these people's religious orientation respectfully. Even I'm not a Christian. I was ethnically raised Catholic, I guess, or sociologically raised Catholic. But it's not. I know a lot about it, and I love the poetry of it, as I do the poetry of most religions. But as a belief system, it's not something I adhere to. But I wanted to treat their adherence to it respectfully and treat them as real people. Yeah.
Got one or two more? or maybe.
Hi.
Hi.
So when you first see Simon and you first see Henry, like you see their names emblazoned on their outfits. Is that a reference to the previous movies, or?
Yes, well, they're all garbage men, you see.
Yeah.
You haven't seen the previous movies, I
Well,
imagine.
no, but
Right.
there was reference to that.
Well,
before
so,
that they met.
in the first one, Simon is a garbage man, and Henry comes to town, and he was once a janitor, but he's not anymore. And he convinces Simon that he can and should write poetry. And so this garbage man becomes this famous poet. And then in Faye Grimm, which takes the story to another part of the world, there is in fact an Afghan, jihadist who is also a garbage man who knows Henry. So the idea is that there are these garbage men all over the world who are writing poetry or becoming, politically active activists who are garbage men. Fertile ground.
Over here, sir.
I'm just curious about your musical compositions for your films and maybe the process you go through to compose the music. Do you think about it while you're shooting or before you even write it, or something that's after the fact?
Most of the time it's after I shoot the film. I sit down and the film is edited, close to being edited, and then I begin I might have little scraps of ideas, and then I let the film affect me, how I've cut it, how the dialogue flows, the rhythm and melody, the dialogue and the movement. But this was a little different. There were 3 or 4 major cues in this that were music that were already pretty developed. I used some of them during the Kickstarter campaign, actually. I was putting them up. And then, I went back and I reworked them. You can take a song apart and use its constituent elements to work around. And for me, it's important that the music, well, whether it existed before the movie or not, doesn't really matter. I would take it apart and start all over again because I need the music to work in concert with the dialogue and the movement, so that everything is working together as a, beautiful machine of some kind, organism, beautiful organic machine.
Back here.
Hi, I work in the art department and I always pay keen attention to the art in a film. And I wanted to ask you about the styling of your films. I've found that you usually have pretty spare art design in your films, and I was wondering if that was a choice that was predominantly driven by budget, or if that's a stylistic thing where you find that each piece gives something to your audience, so you keep it spare. And I was also curious, the technology in the film, it kind of goes back and forth. You don't see a cell phone, but you do see laptops, and you have old-style suitcases, but a modern car. And I was just curious, and the revolver, I was curious if there was a statement you were trying to make with those things.
No, I don't think so. Some of the things, like the suitcase, goes all the way back to the first film. So it's an object that's traveled over the 20 years. Interesting. No cell phones. Yeah, we asked ourselves that. Wouldn't he have a cell phone? And we said, no. Maybe he's not. In a certain way, Ned is not a cheapskate, pecuniary. He's careful with his money. He's careful about everything, but he just doesn't need it. But also, stylistically, I hate having to shoot so many scenes with people talking on phones, which is what the whole world really is. If you want to make a realistic movie now, it's just movies of people talking, texting, talking and texting at the same time. So there is that, trying to find ways to avoid that. But art generally, I'm a very, very heavy art department filmmaker. I consider myself a designer. I consider the whole thing, I've just designed something here for you. And I work with designers, the costume designer sitting right behind you. And but the language, the syntax of my design is spare. I don't want anything superfluous. If it's not there doing at least something, if it could do two things, if it can mean two things, at least, I'm happy. That's, of course, not always possible, very rarely possible, but that's my aim. But that's where the spareness comes from.
So we got two more, one right here, and I believe you will be the last question.
Yeah, since we're at Kickstarter, I have to ask about your experience with the campaign, specifically rewards.
The experience with the campaign, well, it was good ultimately. It was a real ride, 30 days. It was a tall order, and the good people at Kickstarter warned me. They were very supportive and wanted me to succeed, but they said, that's a big number for you. You're not Spike Lee, you're not, Veronica Mars or whatever. How about doing half that, And I was like, well, half that won't do me any good. I need all of it. So, and they said, it's your decision. We're not the principal. We're just the organization you're using to do this, and we want you to succeed. So I said, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to go for it. And so I went for it, and it was really hard, psychologically, emotionally, psychically difficult to be that social, to be friends with all these strangers all over the world, and not be insincere. That was way too much. I'm just not that social. So anyway, but it was a good experience ultimately. It racked me for a while. I was out of commission for a month or so after it. But it did set up an example for me, if nobody else. I know this is a way I would like to continue working, except I hope I never have to go for such a big number. I know for some people, $300,000 is not so big a number, for movies, whatever. But my films aren't terribly mainstream and popular, so it was a tall number. And this was a big story. I've written lots of stories that aren't so large. They don't travel different cities. They don't have all these characters, where, raising half that would be great, raise $150,000 and, can make a good little film. But this one just, the pressure was on. I mean, Liam isn't getting any younger even. It had to be now. I couldn't do this story if Liam was 26 years old, 27, 28, 30 years old. It had to be done now, And so I just went for it.
Last question.
Thank you. Quick question. The choice of the DP in this comedic film, did you change from each of your films, or did you kept the same person?
No, there were 3 different DPs in each of the films. Mike Spiller, who shot all of my films in the 90s, and who's now the director of Modern Family. He actually stopped being a DP. And Sarah Colley, who has shot a couple of my films, she shot Fagram. And Vlad Subotic shot some work for me when I was living in Europe. And then he came over here to shoot this one. Yeah.
Cool.
I was just wondering, the continuity between the 3 films.
For DP, well, I didn't worry about that. Like I said, they really felt to me, I really wanted them to be 3 distinctly different movies made at a certain time about different things, and also about my stylistic interests, my artistic interests at that time, but using this family, So I didn't worry about a continuity of imagery. With Vlad, it was different. He's Eastern European. He's got this kind of really moody dramatic kind of thing. I was like, dude, just lighten up. Let's have some more light in here. We got a beautiful girl here lying on the bed. She's happy to, be beautiful here, and let's have some light on this.
So did you mention to like Linklater in the early 2000s this idea of the...
I didn't, but some people have suggested that he and I get together to talk about this, to have a conversation like this, actually, because Rick, of course, had it planned. I wasn't. When I made Henry Fool, I wasn't thinking about a trilogy, but I wouldn't have undertaken Fay Grimm unless I knew that I could do this one. So before I wrote Fay Grimm, but I didn't initiate trying to get the financing until I was living in Berlin for a number of years. I came back here to New York and I took Liam out to coffee. He was going to NYU at the time. He was like 17, I guess. And I had to ask him, I said, are you going to keep doing this acting thing? Because if I do the Fay Grimm thing, we're going to have to do 3. And it's going to be all about you. And he was at 17. He was like, I don't know. Maybe. So, but something about, he thought he wanted to be a filmmaker. But I could just tell hanging out with him around Union Square, he was a star. Like the girls, women walking by and checking him out. I think it's fate here. Yeah. But I was shocked when I didn't see him. After we made Fay Grimm, I didn't see him for like 4 or 5 years. And I was really afraid. I didn't know how he had grown up, And he grew up to be a good-looking, charismatic young man who's got his chops down. I mean, he's a very hard-working, conscientious actor. Yeah. So, and exactly the kind of actor I liked working with. Directing him and Martin Donovan and Robert Burke, some of you might know, but some of these characters, the Reverend and Chet, and Bill Sage, who plays Bud, these guys were the young men who my career started out with. They were the leading men in my early films. So it was hilarious directing those guys opposite Liam, because there's this generational thing, but they were had the same kind of moves. Really great.
Well, Hal, can't thank you enough, and just want to express what big fans we have been for a long time, will continue to be, and congratulations to the movie. And when is the theatrical release? It's coming out later this year?
April 1,
All right.
at the IFC Center in New York. They'll run there, and Los Angeles that week, but maybe the Friday. And it looks like Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Chicago, and Boston, all in the April. After that, we'll spread out.
All right. Well, we'll
and
tell
also on Vimeo on demand. There's going to be this new thing, halhartley.com.
Nice.
Possiblefilms.com, which is my site, is going to become halhartley.com. And it's basically the Hal Hartley TV channel. You'll be able to stream a number of my films or download them or whatever.
Fantastic.
Hal Hartley, 24/7.
All right.
Well, thanks so much for coming out, folks.
Thank you.